Welcome to the first installment of Coach Hanahan's awful audio recordings. My throat hurts, so I'm going to try to be as clear as possible. And we're going to start out with Standard 9, Civil War. I know I've gone over some things in class for certain classes, but I definitely want to hit on habeas corpus, second inaugural address, and the Gettysburg speech. Um, Early on in the war, there were a lot of people in the North who supported the South. You think about it, you have the border states of Missouri, Kentucky, Delaware, and Maryland. And those guys, they owned slaves, some of them. And a lot of those slave owners supported the South. And as they spoke out against the war or wanted to help the South, Lincoln suspended habeas corpus, which is their right to have a trial and go in front of a judge, and the judge would determine guilt. Well, when he suspended that, they were put into jail and left there until the end of the war. Um, so through the battles, we have the Battle of Antietam, which is in 1862, and it allowed Lincoln to issue the proclamation, or excuse me, the Emancipation Proclamation. And basically, the Emancipation Proclamation did not do what it said it did. It freed all slaves in southern held territories. Anywhere where the Confederate States of America still governed, it freed all of those slaves. So basically, in the Deep South, in Virginia and Tennessee, North Carolina. It did not free the slaves where Lincoln had power to free them: Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, Delaware. He didn't want to free those slaves because it could cause those states to secede and add manpower, add technology, add industry, add resources to the South. So he freed the slaves in the South, which he couldn't do because he didn't have that power. He is not the president of the Confederate States of America. And because he did that, he made the war over slavery. So that's really the important part of the Emancipation Proclamation, is that it didn't free any slaves, but it made the war over the moral issue of slavery. So a couple of things result from that. If a slave was lucky enough to escape, he was able to go to the North and become a free man. The Fugitive Slave Law, which was part of the Compromise of 1850, stated that all Northern citizens had to return a runaway slave. Well, if they're free, then they don't have to return them. So the Fugitive Slave Law does not apply. And since the Southern states seceded and left the Union anyway, then it doesn't have any effect regardless. On to the Gettysburg Address. After the three-day battle in July, in the right first period, July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, Lincoln gives the Gettysburg Address 2 weeks after to commemorate the sacrifice that the Union soldiers made at Gettysburg. And it was just a commemoration of their death. Like, these guys gave their lives for this valid cause, and it brought unity. And it focused the nation, the United States, the North, on the war. And it basically just starts out 407 years ago, our forefathers brought to this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty. Basically saying our founding fathers created this nation, and it's worth sacrificing your life to save it. So it was just this rah-rah speech to get the guys fired up. Moving to his second inaugural address in 1864, thanks to Sherman's march to the sea and after Gettysburg, Lincoln won re-election. And when he gives his re-election, it's pretty clear that the North is going to win. The South is basically just waiting to give up. So In his speech, he basically lays out his plans for our next standard, which is Reconstruction. The South is demolished. Vicksburg was defeated. Charleston is burnt to the ground. Atlanta is burnt to the ground. A lot of the railroads have been tied by the Sherman bow ties when Sherman would come through and melt the railroad steel to the point where he could bend it and it would never be fixed again. So there's these questions, what do we do with the South? Well, Lincoln answered those questions in his second inaugural address. And what he said was, we need to be lenient on the South. It wasn't a very popular view with everyone, but Lincoln had just basically about to win the Civil War. And as a result, it carried a lot of weight. People listened to him. And he just said, we need to be lenient. We need to welcome them back and support these guys because they have nothing. So long story short, Lee surrenders to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in April of 1865. So the Civil War is over. Now if you look at the screen, we will go to Standard 10 and start our slideshow. Now, when I was practicing this earlier, had a little problems with the screen messing up. So if it does so, I apologize, and I'll get it fixed. What we're going to do is I'm going to just give you a few seconds to pause the video as the slide pops up. And after a few seconds, I'll start talking. So if you want to go ahead and pause it and take notes, you need to do so. This will be what we do for Standard 10. We won't do any other handouts, and then we'll have our review and then the test next week, Tuesday or Wednesday. So we'll go ahead and start that now. So this slide really reiterates what I just was talking about. So the South has been devastated, and you can punish these guys because of what they did. They left the United States. They seceded from the Union. As a result of the secession, you could argue that they committed treason, and they did. And so Lincoln and any Northern official could reasonably hang these guys, especially the leaders, Robert E. Lee, Jefferson Davis, any of those guys, you could hang, and it would be justified. Instead, this shows Atlanta burning and them tearing up the railroad, and that kind of demonstrated what Sherman did. So Lincoln, like we discussed in his second inaugural address, stresses that, hey, we need to be lenient on these guys. We need to let them back into the Union. We need to reunite and have peace. He chooses a running mate from Tennessee. Not all the southern areas wanted to secede. There were parts of Tennessee that, and this is awful because now my computer is going to restart. And I guess I will start over in a second whenever I get this saved. Sorry guys, at 9 o'clock it ends. I'll be back.